Hello, Pokemon fans. This is Zella Kebert here with Pokemon Flashfire, the show where I take your questions and ask them to our guest. For our debut, I'd like to welcome Darkshade to the show.
Hey everyone.
Thank you for joining me today, Darkshade, and taking the time to answer the questions from the community.
It's no problem. I'm looking forward to hear what they have to say.
Now, before I get to the community questions, is there anything you would like to tell us about yourself?
Well, for those who are unaware of what I do here, I manage the sprites, work on those. I also work on a lot of the mechanics of the game. I spend a lot of time developing the breeding mechanics, and many other mechanics, mostly with Q. Just making sure that things work, essentially. And yeah, that's pretty much what we need to know, I think.
And speaking of spriting, Thoth posted in the forums that you've been the spriter and a staff member for a full year already.
And a very quick year it has been.
What made you want to be a part of this project?
Well, I've been a long time Pokemon fan, I suppose you could say, and I've always had a massive interest in the development of a game, or games development as it were, and I was asked to join the staff as a CM. And I was pretty impressed with the game when I first played it, which I say that in a way it's sort of like everyone's dream that a Pokemon MMO comes around, and it did. And I was like, well, I'd love to help out with the project, whether it be community management or in a more in-depth way. And obviously I am where I am today. But it was just that I wanted to give everything I had and make sure, that it was worth it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was even looking forward to an MMO of Pokemon at some point. I've seen it. I've seen the memes around, and everybody just saying there should be a Pokemon MMO. And then finally one day I'm browsing on PokeMemes and I see an advertising video for PokeMMO. I'm like, that looks amazing.
Not to flip the interview round, but what were your first thoughts when playing it?
When I first started playing it, there wasn't an Elite Four, of course. I think I joined shortly after all 8 gyms were in, but you couldn't face the Elite Four. And of course, there was no breeding. There were a lot of held items that weren't working, if I remember correctly. And actually, the first time I actually logged on, the very first time when I started playing, there was actually a queue to join the server.
Ah, yes, the dreaded queues. But well, whilst they're annoying to be behind, it shows that we're doing the right job, or rather, it shows that we're doing something right.
Well, yes, exactly. And like I just sat in the queue and I was like, well, 300 people is not too bad. I can sit here and do some other stuff while I'm waiting for my turn to get on the server. So I just sat and waited patiently and did other things while waiting in line.
Well, hopefully you continue to play, as does everybody who's listening to this.
Yes, and moving along actually to the community questions. The first one comes from Dano. And Dano says, Dark Shade, will you reimburse me for lost wages and time playing Heart Gold, Platinum, White, and White 2? You're the reason I bought them, damn it.
Well, the story behind that was Dano came to me and he said, or rather, I was talking about X and Y, or he was talking about X and Y, and I said, are you looking forward to it? And he said, well, actually, I haven't played Pokemon since Generation 3, and I was like, really? You should get up to date. So I spoke to him for a bit and convinced him to buy all the generations past Generation 3 to try and get up to date, ready for X and Y. And whilst I won't reimburse him for his lost wages, I do hope he has the best of times playing those games, because they really are fantastic.
Definitely. I mean, Heart Gold, that was an excellent remake of the Gold and Silver versions.
Oh, definitely.
Moving right along to our second question from Clone Man. He asks, Darkshade, who is your favorite Doctor from Doctor Who and why?
That's interesting. I don't believe I've ever stated that I was into Doctor Who, but that is the case. I'm not a massive fan, but I've seen a fair few episodes, going back from the new series to the classic series. And my favorite Doctor probably overall is Tom Baker's Doctor, closely followed by David Tennant. But Tom Baker is probably my favorite because he was serious and funny at the same time, but also had a lot of interesting episodes, like the one with the start of the Daleks, where he has to travel back to how they were first created, and Davros was sort of experimenting with these war machines. And of course, the other reason that he's very likable is because of jelly babies.
Our next question comes from Nate Dog, and he asks, if you had to leak one piece of highly secret development information about PokeMMO, what would it be?
Well, obviously that question is not exactly one I can directly answer, but I'll use my brain here, assuming that I have one. I'd like to think so. I'm going to say if I had to leak something, I would probably give some information on the new region, because I believe it's something that the players would be interested in knowing and will be quite exciting.
The new region definitely has been a topic around the forums. I've seen it from time to time, and I think everybody's just looking forward to the new content in the game.
Me especially, although it's going to be quite the workload, but yeah.
Well, definitely, and it comes with any new addition to the game. I mean, if you want to add new regions or something new to the game, you have to put a lot of work behind it anyways.
Oh, very much so. The smallest of mechanics can take quite a while to plan. It's important to sort of stress that when something's implemented in the game, I know a lot of the players maybe don't quite see sort of the stuff that's involved to get it implemented, but it's not always as easy as it looks. But hopefully we pull everything off right, and it can sometimes take a while. But yeah, we're always trying our best.
Moving along to our next question from I Smash Bro, asking, when can I obtain my own Get Out hat?
The Get Out hat. Well, for those unaware, the Get Out hat story sort of goes like this. The Get Out hat is based on an image macro it's quite a popular image macro, especially on 4chan. It's essentially a picture of a frog, and he's pulling this sort of face. I don't know if its roots go further back than that, but it's pretty much where it's mostly around. And occasionally it has one that's bobbing back and forth, but the frog has a speech bubble by the side of his face that says "Get Out," and it's used quite a lot. Doomuzid was quite a fan of this image macro and requested that I make him a hat that portrayed basically the same thing. So I created a hat which was in the shape of a frog, and every single step you took, it would its mouth would open and a speech bubble would come out saying "Get Out" in full capital letters. Quite a large speech bubble because it took up most of the screen, like it went over the whole of another player. So it's very unlikely that players will ever get a Get Out hat available to them for that reason. Which, I'm sorry, but nobody would ever be able to see their screen again. On another note, I know Gizmo took a liking to it after Doomuzid left staff. So yeah, it was popular for a while. I also think Q wore it at one stage. But yeah, that's the Get Out hat. It's a pretty amusing hat.
And moving to our next question from Winterbra, asking, when will our sprites get a gym to get swole?
Well, I remember him coming to me about this, and he said, can we get a gym to make our sprites look buff? And I was like, well, maybe. But whilst I joke about that, it's not something I haven't really thought about, and I'm gonna, explain why I say that. For a while, I've wanted to do a sort of different body styles, similar to those of the NPCs. So you got your NPCs, which are typical fat guys, or the children, or the old man, etc. I would like to make all of those sort of body styles available, so there's another level of customization. The issue with that is that it requires a lot of work, and I'm not exaggerating that at all. It's essentially recreating customization every single time I create a brand new base, because you have to redraw every single frame. For example, I implement one top, and it may fit the normal sprite, but I'd have to draw a brand new one for the fat guy, for example. But it would still be the same item, so it's pretty much 4 times as much work as it would normally be to create one item. So items would come out a lot slower. Also with sprites, it's a little bit different from 3D in the way that when you create something in 3D, you can model it, and then you can create the accessory, but you can attach the accessory to the player and the player's animation, and it runs smoothly throughout the entire animation. The difference is with sprites is I have to place the sprite in exactly the right place on every single frame. So every single frame of animation will have a brand new drawing, or a copied drawing, but moved in the right place. For example, a hat, just to make sure that it's there when you move.
Well, yes, exactly. Nobody wants to take a step and then their hat stays behind. That'd just be weird.
That would be weird.
We'd see hats everywhere in the game, wouldn't we?
Every couple of steps just sort of dragging behind a player, yes.
Hats confirmed for follower sprites eventually?
That would be neat. Hats on follower sprites, I don't think is ever going to be a possibility. And I made a post about this in the suggestion box once. But the reason behind this is, with characters, everybody's the same height, everybody's the same body shape. Therefore, I can place a hat on all the different frames of animation. It will stay in the right place every single time. With Pokemon, they're all different body heights and they move completely differently. So I would essentially have to create for one item. They have about 4 frames each. Let me just get the math for this. All right, so each Pokemon sprite has 8 frames and they face in 4 directions. I'd need to make a sprite for every single direction it faces and place it in each position, each correct position on the right frame. Then I need to adjust the size of the item to fit every single Pokemon. And remember, there are 386 in Generation 3. That's not including forms. So 4 sprites per Pokemon. That's 4 times 386, which equals 1,544 sprites in total. And then I need to place these sprites on every single frame that a Pokemon has, which is 8 times 386, which is 388 times. And that's for a single item. So the worth isn't quite worth the outcome.
That's quite a hefty workload as well.
Yeah, especially for just one item. If it was like 1,000 items for that, I could definitely consider it, but it's too much.
And then moving along in terms of customization as well, Senile has a question. This is Darkshade. In terms of suggestions for vanity items, what kind of items do you look for, if there are any, and are there any specific criteria?
In my mind, there are sort of criteria. I like to see what people find popular for one. I've also got to make sure that it's spriteable in a way, and it sort of fits the Pokemon style. And then I usually do this a lot, but it doesn't always have to fit into the criteria, as it were. But I like to check whether it's canon, whether something similar has appeared in the anime or in the games, and just sort of, if it's there, it sort of sits right in my mind. But that's because I'm that much of a I don't know way to put it other than a fan of canon. I like to make sure everything fits into the world. I wouldn't want to implement something that seemed very out of place, because my job, partially as I see it, is to make sure that everything feels like it's the same world. And if anything takes away from that, then it's bad in my eyes. That's not to say that I don't read every suggestion that's given to me, because I do, and I go through them all. And my apologies for not putting out so many new items recently, but we'll get to why that is later. But yeah, there are many I've considered and I've not necessarily rejected, but I haven't had the chance to try and sprite them yet.
Continuing on with Senile's question, are there any items that you wanted to put in but found out you couldn't for whatever reason?
I know there were a couple, can't quite remember what they were, but there have been a few where I've sort of given them a go and they either didn't fit or they were shaped so oddly that it didn't quite work. And I was sort of at the point where I was like, I could continue and I could try and put it into sprite form, but it probably wouldn't be worth the time, and I could spend that time implementing other items or giving something else a go.
Yep. And then as well as, are there any specific kinds of suggestions that will always get rejected?
Lewd suggestions and kind of things that take away too much from the point. And I mean lewd by I mean sort of sexual ones. Nobody wants to wear a genital hat or something, though, I'm sure somebody would. Let's say something really obnoxious probably wouldn't make it in, because whilst I understand that that's partially the point of vanity items, and I don't think anybody can disagree, you got to make yourself look pretty. But if it was something that kind of drew too much attention to your character to some degree, then I consider it to be bad, because people don't want to be looking at your character the entire time when they're playing a game. They will look at it, and it's great to have that you have some sort of aura and people go, wow, you look really good. But if it was too sort of, I want to say flashy, but too distracting, I would probably not accept that at all.
And then finally, to close up Sina's question, are there any presumably upcoming wearable items that you can tell us about?
Yes, I can't promise that they'll make it in, whether it be, the next update or a few updates after that or whenever. But I'm looking to make matching outfits for the Molten Hat and the Aquamarine Bandana.
So trying to make it similar to something that's appeared in the franchise already, and something that's been in the shop for a while as well, to match those, since everybody's been asking about them.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I like to go for when making items. I know it's quite a popular suggestion, so I wanted to give my go on it, and I think it's reached the point now, once I finish customization 2.0, which, yeah, I'll explain that later again. But it's essentially, it's one of those things that everybody wants, and I thought, yeah, I would love to give this a go, actually, so that's going to happen.
Moving right along, our next question comes from Beloved Abra, and they ask if you plan on adding any more levels of donator status, and to clarify, the percentage, I can increase the percentage of shiny rate or experience.
It's very doubtful that we'll add additional levels to donator status, but I do think at some point it might get a boost in some sort of direction or a tweak of some kind. I can't say what that is, but it's a possibility that they might get more perks or something along those lines.
The next question from Timmy Boy asks, what is your first name?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, my first name is Darkshade, because I get called that on a daily basis, more so than I do my birth name. But yeah, I'm not going to disclose my first name, but yeah, honestly, Darkshade feels far more homely to me, I guess you could say, than my birth name.
And that's fair enough. Some people have their nicknames that they just want everybody to just call them that, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really have anything against anybody calling me by my birth name, but I see no reason to. This is this is the name I've given myself. This is pretty much who I recognize myself. The name I recognize myself by. So it's the name the community recognizes me by. So yeah, it feels more me than actual me does.
Moving along as well, another question from Beloved Abra asking, what would you say is your overall favorite competition in the game so far?
Ooh, I wouldn't say I have a particular favorite competition, but I have a couple that I've liked a lot. One of them being the Pori's Egg Crisis one recently, which was involving sprites, and obviously that's sort of my area. So it was interesting to see what sort of entries people submitted, and a lot of them were very, very good. Yeah, I was very impressed with the submissions to that competition, and well done to Eggplant of Time for winning. It was very, very close, to be honest. There were a lot of good ones there. It took a while to judge.
Were. I even saw a lot of good ones that I liked. Kind of caveating off of the competition so far, are there any upcoming competitions that you might be looking forward to at all?
That's a good question. I'm always a big fan of the weekly events that take place, the tournaments, Wednesday night doubles, Sunday heavyweights, etc. They're always interesting to me because it's nice to see people constantly trying to participate to try and win, but it's also nice to see new players joining and old players still joining. It's nice to see that there's still a community for events, and hopefully there still will be in many years to come. I like to see tournaments in game, but I also enjoy the occasional sort of odd spin-off, whether it be finding a Pokemon in the wild and looking for the best or worst IVs, or breeding for this one egg move. I always find those particularly interesting, mainly because it's something that people can always do, but it's good fun for anybody who participates.
Exactly. In terms of events, are there any unofficial ones that you've seen any unofficial tournaments that you've seen that you particularly like?
I can't remember who hosted it. It was a Little Cup one at one point that I was very impressed with. That was a very good tournament. My apologies to whoever it was who made it, but yeah, very well done on that tournament. That was really nice.
There's definitely a lot of good ones out there.
Very much so. I would like to see more of them. Go for it. If you've got an idea, bring the community together, post it in competitive alley, and yeah, give it a go.
Moving along, I'm going to take a question from Go Victory asking, what is your favorite starter?
My favorite starter is actually is Cyndaquil, mainly because it evolves into Typhlosion, which is my favorite starter evolution. But it's one of the more odd designs, but it's also very I want to say cool looking, for lack of better words. But yeah, Cyndaquil's a very cool starter. It's not necessarily good in terms of competitive play, although Typhlosion is pretty cool. Both ways, he's got really nice design and he's not bad in competitive. But yeah, I like him just because he looks nice, and he's one of the more interesting ones.
Another question from Beloved Abra. Outside of PokeMMO, do you have any other hobbies?
I don't get much time outside of MMO, which that's what I do. I enjoy it. PokeMMO is my hobby, I suppose you could say, as well as what I do. But I obviously am a big fan of gaming and games in general and games design. I'll go into that a bit. My first game was Pokemon Red, and I used to play a few before that. My father had a couple, even though he wasn't particularly into gaming in general, and that sort of sparked my interest. And that went on, and I played lots of games. I kept up with the Pokemon series and many other series. At age 11, I started editing Fire Red, so that was interesting. I went off from there, sort of did a few edits to Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and also I did some Sonic editing on Sonic Adventure DX, where that was my first taste of texturing and 3D models. But my main influence on that part was Brawl, where I learned to implement brand new characters, brand new movesets, things like that. Go over characters that already existed, porting their animations, porting their different models over the top of other ones, making sure their bones worked with other characters' animations. I picked up a lot from that. And then going back 2 years ago, and I finished this in June, but I took a course on games development, which wasn't exactly what I was hoping it would be. And I expected game development on the course, but that wasn't always what was there. But yeah, I finished a 2-year course on that. The last year was the year I started on PokeMMO, so most of my time went into here and has continued to do so. But yeah, my main hobbies pretty much include gaming and games design, and PokeMMO right at the top. Other than that, I occasionally get the chance to watch some anime, which which is great.
For the ROM hack of Fire Red, kind of a bit of fire foreshadowing, don't you think?
Yeah, I find it really weird actually looking back at it. It's strange to think that I worked with this game. I mean, going back to I started with Red as my first game that I actually owned, and then at 11 I started editing Fire Red, did this other bit, and then now I'm back, sort of working with Fire Red again, which is very interesting. But it also means that I'd like to think it also means that I have a large understanding of what's in the game and what needs to be done, what sort of things need to be taken into account, and being a fan of the series as I am, I also like to make sure everything fits in with the overall theme, and by that I mean making sure things are canon, make sure it fits in with the lore and things like that.
Definitely. And moving right along, speaking of making sure things fit in, Jay Wing Wang Wong has a few questions. Starting off with, what is customization 2.0?
That question. I'm glad he brings this one up because it saves me bringing that myself. But customization 2.0 is essentially the point where I've worked with the sprites for so long, and I'm talking about the character sprites and all the additional add-ons, clothing, etc. But I've reached the point where I don't want to continue to update them all the time because I know you might have realized recently I've been touching them up pretty much every single update. And they started off as the GBA style, and they swiftly went onto Nintendo DS. And I'll explain the reason I did that because I know there were a lot of sort of confusion. There was a lot of confusion when they first came out, but you've got to remember every single time I create a customization item, I'm usually going to want to update it. The difference there was the more customization items I put into the GBA style, the more I would then have to revamp it to the Nintendo DS style later on, and that would have been more work than it was worth. So it was better me push out the, essentially finished sprites or finished style sprites as quickly as I could, so I can continue working on that style and not give myself twice the work. But yeah, I've been working on the Nintendo DS sprites for a while now, or the Nintendo DS style sprites rather. I should probably be calling them. And I'm not quite happy with how they look, but I've been working really, really hard recently on making sure they're up to scratch. And I'm not sure when Customization 2.0 will come out, but it will essentially bring sprites that fit in with the world, especially the NPCs. Anybody who's in game, I don't want you to feel like the NPCs are NPCs. I want you to look at them and go, wait, is that another player? And if I pull that off, then I've done a good job. Alongside that will also be smoother animations. For example, one of the things that I'm putting together is, or already have put together, when you run, your body sort of sways a bit, so it gives a more realistic effect than staying in one place. I can't really think of a better way to explain that, but yeah, that's one of the things. Another being, now when you fish, your fishing rod has a lure on the end of it, and you actually physically throw it. A lot of the animations have been cleaned up. A lot of the sprites have been smoothened out. I can't think of a better way to describe it, but yeah, they've been smoothened out. They look a lot nicer now. And it should hopefully be the point where I cut off from fixing up the sprites, go, wow, I'm happy with how that turned out. Then I can move on to creating new ones.
Definitely. And then his second question asks, what are your plans for the new region?
Well, obviously there's not much I can give away on that, but my overall plans for the new region are to make it feel like it's part of Pokemon. I don't want to ever detract from that. I want to make sure it's fun. It's something different from what players might have experienced before, and I'll say that it might be something that they may recognize in some way or another.
The final question from Jay Wing Wang Wong is, what breeding mechanics will be fixed?
Well, the breeding mechanics have been in a lot of debates recently. We got a pretty obvious bit of feedback from the community, and we were well aware of this before we actually distributed the patch, but you can't always fit everything in at once. I think it's important to remember at all stages that any mechanic in the game is usually put down as a base that we can work off in the future. This goes for many things such as like matchmaking, the game corner, etc. Breeding was also one of those mechanics, but the dislike that people were having with it was mostly based on the amount of steps things took, and what I took from it and what the other staff members took from it was that it detracted too much from the actual gameplay, and we hope to sort of bring some of that back with a newer system. Take less of your game time away, give you a chance to continue to do what you want to do, but also have egg hatching there sort of on the side, so you can do that whenever you need.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know how many times I've actually fallen asleep trying to hatch eggs as well.
It's a lengthy process, but whilst it's frustrating in some ways, it does work. It does do its job for the most part. It's just not finished yet.
Yeah. Moving right along. Emily's question reads: Dark Shade, why do you love toast so much?
Ah, well, I should probably explain that a bit at first. I tend to stay up pretty late, and when I'm working on stuff, I also get pretty hungry because I tend not to eat a lot during the day. And toast is something I tend to make because it's quick and easy to put together, but doesn't detract too much from my actual time. So I usually go down. It's sometimes 3 in the morning at that point, and I'll make myself some toast. Make sure I'm not so hungry when I'm working. Get back to work, and then eventually go off to bed. It's a nice sort of quick, easy, nice tasting meal, but at the same time, it sort of eases me into that bedtime state, I guess you could say. I can't think of a better way to describe it, but yeah, it's nice. It's warm. It's after I have some toast, I'm sort of like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna continue what I'm doing, and then I'm gonna go to bed.
Moving right along, Chespra asks, how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 18.
Our last question comes from Una425, and it says, Darkshade, do you have a preferred generation among the Pokemon generations?
Yes. As I said earlier, my first generation and my first game was Pokemon Red, so I don't want anybody to take this as a nostalgia thing. And the second generation I got to play, this is because I was pretty young at the time and I missed out on my parents, I guess, purchasing me this particular generation. But I actually played second generation third, and it's been my favorite generation to date. There's just something about it. Johto brought a lot to the table. All of the mythology behind the region is pretty in depth. You've got Ho-Oh, who created the 3 legendary dogs, Lugia, who watches over the 3 legendary bird trio from Kanto, and it had a nice sort of less suburban feel to it. It was far more naturalistic, unlike perhaps Unova, which was a great generation 5. But I quite like the naturalistic side of things. All the routes were sort of pretty grassy, I guess you could say. A lot of the towns were very different from each other. They seemed sort of cottages and villages splattered around. All the even the cities. I mean, Goldenrod was a pretty big city and it was suburbanized. But then you had places like Ekrutik, which was based on old Japan, and I think that was very, very interesting. There was a lot of sort of taking from the first generation. It may have only implemented 100 new Pokemon, or introduced rather. But at the same time, you had stuff like the Dragon Cave or whatever it's called behind the 8th gym, and it was just stuff like that that sort of made it a special generation in my eyes. And of course, going to my avatar, I'm quite a big fan of Celebi. The legendary itself is interesting in my eyes because it has an amazing design. I'm not really sure why I like it so much, but I really like Celebi's design. But in Ilex Forest in Johto, there's a shrine dedicated to it, which is just known as Ilex Forest Shrine. But the story behind that is essentially it's placed in the forest, and you talk to it, and it says this shrine is in honor of the forest protector. And there's an NPC outside of the forest which says something along the lines of, I bet the forest protector is grass type or something. And it was sort of like there was a presence within the game that the legendary was there, but it was never actually sort of brought to light. And that was far more interesting to me because unlike Mew, where it was just never ever mentioned apart from commercialized in the movie, etc., it sort of felt like it existed there, but it was very secretive and didn't really come out. And a bit of trivia for you here, if that wasn't enough. Celebi was actually obtainable in the Japanese version of Crystal, and that was the only time. And it was available for a limited time when you hooked your Game Boy Color up or Game Boy to an adapter which linked to your mobile phone, and you would call up a number which connected to one of Game Freak's servers, and you could essentially download what was called the GS Ball, and you would collect this from a special PC Poker Center from Goldenrod City, and a nurse would give you this GS Ball, and essentially what you do is you'd take it to Kurt, who's the ball maker in Johto, and he would look after it for a day. He'd give it to you back the next day, and the forest would be swaying, and I mean, it was genuinely swaying. It was small 8-bit sprites, but it was moving back and forth. And you'd go up to the shrine and place the ball in there, and Celebi would fly down. You could see its small little sprite flying down, which is a nice touch. And you could fight it. But yeah, that was only in Japan and only for a very limited amount of time. So that sort of makes it special in my eyes.
Yuna also asks what are your thoughts about the upcoming Gen 6 with X and Y?
I'm very, very excited for Generation 6. As a sprite artist, it's sad to see it detract from 2D, but at the same time, I'm very excited for the 3D jump. Colosseum and XD pulled it off pretty well. I'm excited for the next generation as I am most generations, but yeah, I'm interested to see where Game Freak will take it, and there's a lot to that each game of the series has added overall. Like Generation 2 added breeding, Generation 3 added the PokeNav and a million other things. Generation 4 added better competitive mechanics in the form of the physical special split. Generation 5 added the Dream Radar, etc. There's a lot that every single game has brought to the series. So I'm looking forward to what Generation 6 has to offer.
That wraps up all of our questions from the community. Before we close up, do you have any remarks to the community at all?
Yeah, I'll say this. Thank you for all playing the game. I hope you're enjoying it. We appreciate all your feedback, and hopefully you remain patient with us with the updates.